Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. Full disclosure, I'm a huge fan of Sam Mellinger and his writing and have been ever since he came upon the scene. Of course, he came upon the scene in ways that maybe you didn't notice, covering high school sports and everything else. And as a young man still, in 2010, became the lead columnist for the Kansas City Star sports section. He later on, of course, has added a colleague in Vahe Gregorian, and they're a fantastic team. And actually, we did a Kansas City profile of Vahe Gregorian in the early days of DannyClinkScale.com and the Reasonably Irreverent Commentary. Sam's writing is insightful, it's creative, and it also has a lot of facts behind it. He has an active mind, an active brain, and he's just an interesting writer. But of course, the purpose of Kansas City Profiles is to get the people whose work you know so well, to get you to know them better and find out what made them tick, what influenced them when they were young, what their growing up time was like, what their likes, dislikes, romances, and everything else are like. We try to get inside the person and get a revealing look at somebody you might be a fan of because of their work, but don't really know much about. That's what we'll do next with Sam Mellinger. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure you will be too, as we continue next on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing on the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast.
We're here with Joe Spiker, the president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you worked for other companies in the construction industry. What inspired you to start your own company in Easton Roofing?
Well, you know, Danny, when you are working for somebody else, you oftentimes don't get to see the project through from beginning to end, and you don't get the final control over the customer experience. And I wanted to build a place where people can come and get work done on their house and not have to worry about being treated the wrong way and get a good customer service experience start to finish.
The company slogan is "Where Integrity Matters." Why is that so particularly important to you?
Well, for us, what that means is treating each other with respect at work, treating our clients with respect, and making the right choice, especially when no one's looking. So when you're presented all the time as a contractor with choices that have to be made, are you going to make more money on this if you cut a corner? And we just wanted to make a place and a slogan that said to our people and to whoever is our customer, we're not going to do that. We're going to make the right choice regardless of profit.
Easton Roofing, where integrity matters.
There's no need to get a case of the Mondays every week, not during football season anyway. Hey, this is Matt Llewellyn from the 23rd Street Brewery, and we are the place for Monday Night Football. Food and drink specials every week, and all new televisions always at 23rd Street Brewery. The hardest thing about Mondays now will be getting through the workday, although waking up on Tuesdays might be a little bit tough. But remember, watch all the Chiefs games, NFL games, every game at the 23rd Street Brewery.
I was duped, and I recommend you be next. For better or worse, the ultra-realistic impression of me sits now in my wife's office to spook her on a daily basis. So what is Doob? D-O-O-B. It's the keepsake of a lifetime, a 3D-generated, incredibly lifelike figurine. 66 cameras take an image at exactly the same moment in any pose, and state-of-the-art 3D technology transforms that into exact replicas of you, anyone you know or love, a pet, whomever is close to your heart. Create lifetime memories with a Doob. Visit their Facebook page at Doob 3D Kansas City, or better yet, see their incredible creations. Visit their location down on the plaza in the heart of it at 231 West 47th Street in KC Mo. Doob, be next. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyClinkScale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. As I said in the introduction, I'm a big fan of your work, and so this is a pleasure for me. And we've done a couple of the writers for the Star, and that's a great bunch. Just to start off, we've done profiles of Vahe and Blair, and in an industry where it's shrinking and changing. It must be really great to have colleagues like that.
Those are two of my favorite people in the world.
Right.
Not just professionally or not just that I work with, but both those guys are just as kind, as generous, as thoughtful, as interesting. I mean, they make my work life much better than it would be otherwise, for sure.
Let's start sort of at the beginning. I always joke, and we never start really at the beginning because you don't know anything about that part. But you were born in
thankfully, right?
Right. You were born in Emporia, And you would move to Lawrence in 7th grade. But what was little boy Sam like?
At least in my memory, it was just all about like sports for me. Growing up, we had there weren't a lot of kids in my neighborhood, but there were a few, and one of them was right next door, and we shared a driveway. And at the end, was sort of kind of a circle, cement. So both garages on either side, and there was a basketball goal in the middle. And I remember I have this distinct memory of being in kindergarten. And at that time, I don't know if people still do this. We have a son in kindergarten, and it's all day. But at that time, at least for us, it was half day. And you could choose morning or afternoon. And I chose morning so that I could come home and just like get my granny shots up, to the basketball goal. That is one of the most distinct memories I have. Like playing basketball. All the other kids were older than me, but they let me play with them. And it was a good childhood. I was lucky. Two good parents that loved me and my sister a lot, and we weren't rich by any stretch, but traveled to Chicago a lot as a kid, and played sports, had fun. It was great.
What did your dad do?
He was a lawyer in Emporia, and then when we moved, he switched careers, and it's kind of a funny story now. This is another distinct memory I have, is my dad sitting us down at the kitchen table and telling us that there was some kids at school might ask us or say something that he got sued by this guy, and he wasn't a trial lawyer or anything. I actually don't know what kind of law he did. I just know he wasn't a trial lawyer. We had a client that was a farmer, and this guy, often like couldn't pay, and my dad really liked him, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But we had like TVs that didn't work in our basement because that's how this guy was paying my dad. And he ended up suing my dad for something. I don't know what it was, but it was for 1 penny less than $10 million. And so there was something about $10 million. You couldn't go to that. So it was $9,990,000, like on and on. And at that point, my dad was like, screw this. Like, this is not the profession for me. If I'm doing all this for this guy and then the case didn't go anywhere. It was thrown out. But then we moved here. We moved to Lawrence. My dad got a job in Kansas City. It was a government job, and he worked with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and so that's why we moved to Lawrence. My mom worked in the arts, pretty much all. She took off from the time that my sister was born until I think I got into first grade. So maybe would that be about 9 years, something like that. And she worked at the Lead Center when we were in Lawrence. She was the director of education there, and then we got to Lawrence, and again, more good memories. It was all good.
Did you stay in Lawrence all through high school?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what was there any adjustment trauma moving from Emporia, which is a smaller place? Well, actually, it's not a smaller place, but maybe your neighborhood was there. It's a different place anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they're both relatively small towns, I guess, but. It was bigger. I mean, Lawrence was for sure bigger. We were, I think in Emporia, it was like 20,000 people there.
Right.
Maybe when we lived there, maybe 25. And then Lawrence, depending on when you count it, like if the students are in town, it's 3 or 4 times that. At least when we moved there, it's bigger now. It was an adjustment for sure. Like I was very comfortable in Emporia and like had my friends and had, teams that I always played on with the same kids and all that. And it was different for
this
sure.
Was in 7th grade you moved, right?
Yeah,
we talked about that.
Yep. We moved,
and that's kind of a coming of age time for a young person. You're entering your teen years, so it is a time of adjustment anyway.
Yeah, and it was it felt bigger. The school felt bigger to me. I wasn't, at least at that time, like the most outgoing. But again, like I found sports, and playing basketball helped a lot. Playing baseball helped a lot. So I ended up, I was not scared, maybe a little bit scared about the move, but it wasn't more than a couple months before I realized, I like it here. I like it here a lot. I met the woman who is now my wife, in 7th grade in Lawrence. So, it was great. I love Lawrence.
We'll get to that later. That relationship and development of that, meeting somebody in 7th grade and ending up marrying them. That's quite interesting. Talk about yourself as an athlete and how you like sports, how much aptitude you felt like you had, disappointments, thrills, whatever.
I want to be very clear. I loved sports much more than I was good at them. I want to be very clear about that. As a basketball player, I would describe myself as a volume shooter, disinterested in defense, like to go for the hero pass. So it was like, high risk, high reward, lots of turnovers, lots of 3-point attempts. Basketball was the sport that I loved the most growing up. And I don't know why. I think it was because you could always go play, even if there wasn't anybody else around, you just go shoot.
Right.
And I also liked, one of the things that clicked with me as a kid, this is a weird thing to think about maybe, but I just thought about like when I hit a 3-pointer, if it was just me, and I was 20 feet away from the basket and I shot it and it went in, that's what the pros do. That exact move. You know what I mean? Like they do it. That one little part of it was exactly what the people that I would watch on TV would do. And I think that's what I really, got into it. Baseball. I loved baseball as a kid as well. But once guys started throwing curveballs, I was kind of out. And played a little bit of football, nothing like super competitive or noteworthy at all. But I absolutely adored sports. If I wasn't playing, I was definitely watching, thinking about, talking about with my friends. It was just like sort of. It was more than just like the interest of, this is a cool game. I watched that one guy; he's really good. I always loved the way that people came together around sports. Lawrence, I think it's still like this, but when I was there, it was sports obsessed. And
talk about what time period this was.
I graduated high school in '96.
Okay.
And some people think I'm joking, but I promise you I'm not. Our high school, it was 3 years. It was just sophomore, juniors, and seniors at Lawrence High. And I think we were like 500 students over capacity. They had trailers that they would bring in for classes, like between classes moving. I mean, you were just like a sardine walking down and I promise you that Lawrence would have split. Free State opened, I think 97, 98, something like that. It would have been at least 5 years early if it wasn't for football.
Right. I lived there then. I remember.
That is absolutely a true thing.
Because they were winning state championships.
Oh, my God. They were dominant.
I just remember reading the newspaper when I came back here in 94. I'd been living in the East, went to school at KU, of course. But I remember reading the newspaper, and this Lawrence football team, they'd be writing the game story, and it would say, and then after converting a 4th and 3 from their own 18-yard line, mm-hmm. I mean, they did. I was like, what the hell kind of football is this? Yeah. Well, they just knew they could get it, I guess. And, Dick Purdy and that bunch played power football and won championships, and it absolutely should have been split years before.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, there were a lot of really good athletes, too. I mean, it wasn't just that the school was so big. I think there was like 12 or 15 or 7, something like that, of D1 scholarships, the D1 athletes in my like high school class. But I think they lost like one game in high school in the 3 years that I was there. I did not play football. I want to be clear. This is not me bragging. It was the other people, but it was ridiculous. They were so good. And it's a weird thing, right? Like sports can mean everything to people. And, it wasn't until it was just like, look, this is ridiculous how overcrowded this is. We need another school. And I think it says something when you split and there's still both 6A schools and not like small 6A schools. You know what I mean? Like it was, but it was fun. I had a great experience. It was a lot of fun.
Did you play basketball in high school?
I did, just as a sophomore.
Okay.
It was like, again, the disinterest in defense and things like that caught up with me.
Right. What was you mentioned how overcrowded it was and everything. What was the social scene like for a high school student like yourself?
It was great. I had a lot of friends. I mean, there was probably, 8 or 10 of us that were like super close, but this isn't true. This isn't literally true, but it felt like I knew everybody in the school. It really did. I think there was like 650 kids in my class. And I think I probably at that time felt like I knew everybody's name. didn't, but maybe knew half of them. But it was fun, man. Like we would, go to, the strongest memories I have is, they gave us open lunch because there was too many kids. And I had a 1978 Buick LeSabre. It was a hand-me-down from my grandparents. Huge car. And, we would pack 6 or 7 or 8 guys in that car and, just go to lunch and park in the Taco John's yard, like in the grass because there wasn't any, parking spots. And we'd use these coupons that we got 3 tacos for 99 cents. Going to football games and, a lot of our, like my best friends were, on that team and going through and winning these, at least for us in high school, like these big games. And, and a lot of those same guys were on the basketball teams. We go, it was a lot of fun, but it was, it didn't seem like this at the time. It was just like normal. It's what existed, but it is crazy looking back, like how focused on sports everything was. And I have this, another memory I have is at some point you start to think about what you want to do for a living. And I know this doesn't happen very often, but sports writing, like I loved sports and I loved to write. And once I found out that you could like put those two things together, that's the only thing that I've ever like seriously thought about doing. And I just remember my mom, like, not discouraging me, but I don't think she thought it was a real job. I don't think she thought it was like a real thing that people could do. And so it was always like, well, what about, this, you could be a teacher or a lawyer or like whatever. And I was like, no, like this is the thing that I want to do. And, it wasn't, honestly, like, I don't think it was until maybe almost when I graduated college or just out that she was, oh, okay, like this is, I guess he's serious.
That being said, she was kind of the inspiration for you writing, correct?
Yeah, she was. She was like an inspiration, like in everything too. I mean, not just this, but for sure this. And she was the first person. I don't know if this makes sense the way I'm going to describe it, but she was the first person I knew that could write, like that could actually, that the words read differently when she wrote them. And there was like personality in the words, there was color, there was, description, it was like active verbs. And, it was just like, it was different than the textbooks I would read at school. And she taught English, early, before she had my sister. And, so she had that background. Her mom was an English teacher as well. And so reading and writing was always like a thing, with us. And, I mean, it was, I think every kid, at least it's lucky like I was to have parents like I did. You want to do stuff to make your parents proud and make them happy. And I could always see that, like, if I get a good grade on a paper, if I would write something interesting or whatever, my mom was more proud of that than when I would come home with like a good math grade. You know what I mean? Like she wanted good grades everywhere, but like writing, I could always tell was a little bit special to her. And I think at least subconsciously, and now I can look back and know that it was subconsciously, that pushed me in it too. I could see that it was something that made her happy.
Your parents would eventually divorce, but you described the fact that generally you had a happy home life during that period of time.
Yeah, it was great, man. I mean, like they got divorced. It was right before my senior year in high school. I think the divorce went like official or whatever, like during my senior year of high school. But, and that sucked. Like that, there were parts of that were hard, but
as you were growing up, was it generally a happy home? Yeah.
I mean, it's, to the point that when I told my friends, like none of them believed me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because like, of all the kids, like my parents, I have memories of them like, holding hands, and I never really heard them fight. So it was a shock. It was a shock, but I can't, look, like that little part, like that one part of that part of my life, there were some difficulties, but, I didn't have a dad that walked out on me, like I didn't have like, a dad that drank too much or that, got abusive. Like they were both, like terrific models of kindness, of how to treat people. There's never been a doubt in my mind for a second of either of my parents, like if they would do something for me or if I could go to them for advice. I've been very lucky in that way.
What was your relationship like with your sister?
We've never been. Look, I love my sister. She just brought her kids for Thanksgiving. We had a great time. We've never been like super close the way that some siblings are. You know what I mean? Like
3 years separated, a boy and a girl. That doesn't sound that different. That unusual to me.
Yeah. I mean, I did but she would stick up for me. There were times where like, I remember at like ninth grade formal, we had ninth grade formal, and which is a weird thing, I think. Ninth grade formal. And my sister, that 78 Buick LeSabre, that was my sister's car before it was my car. And I would have been either 14 or 15. My birthday's in May, so depending on when it actually was, I was either 14 or 15. And my sister gave me the car, which is kind of a ridiculous thing. And it was me and my wife, like my now wife, Katie, and I think it was Chris Wareholtz and Sarah Carlson. Anyway, there were four of us. And I was just like driving around. We went to the Eldridge for dinner or whatever. Wow. And I can't believe, what would have happened if I got pulled over? Like, I can't be driving when I'm either 14 or 15. But my sister would do things like that for me. Yeah. She's a good person. She's a good person.
But you weren't like close buds or whatever.
Yeah,
exactly. Hung out, told your troubles to each other.
Totally.
None of that.
Yep.
Well, since we've touched on it twice, why don't you tell the journey of you and Katie?
She was, like I said, we met in seventh grade. I think we had English class together, and like whatever you call date or go out. I think at that point it was like, are you going out with? She was my girlfriend, and that was true basically all the way through high school. We'd have like break up for a week or whatever moments, but she was my date to like every dance, every school dance, prom and everything else. She went to Michigan State for college, and I went to Kansas, so there was some distance obviously, but we always kept in touch. She dated other people in college, I did too, but again, we always kept in touch. She moved to Chicago right out of school. I got the job here in Kansas City, so again, distance. But when she would come back for holidays, for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, we would get together. But again, like you can't. There's distance, right?
Right.
And
what was she doing in Chicago?
She's an interior designer.
Okay.
And so she worked for a couple different companies, like mostly downtown, traveled a little bit, and had a lot of friends there. And I actually, like, there's part of me that thought I might end up in Chicago.
It's a great city.
Love Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my mom's parents were from. That's where my mom's from. And we used to go up there. My dad's parents died early, like before I was born, basically. And so we would go see my mom's parents, literally like 3-4 times a year. I felt like in some ways I grew up in Chicago, because that's where we always took trips there and here, actually, into Kansas City. But anyway, again, we're dating other people. I actually got married too young.
So you married somebody else?
Yeah. I think I was 26, something like that, 27. Anyway, that lasted not very long at all, less than 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. And then shortly after that, me and Katie reconnected. Facebook, I think she heard, and we did, we were on a lot of Southwest flights for a while, between Kansas City and Chicago. And, that was probably maybe a year, maybe a little bit more than a year, something like that. And then at some point, I forgot exactly what started it, but she talked about moving, or we talked about her moving to Kansas City. And you know what it was? I got a job offer, and I almost took it. and it was a job that I could have moved. I could have lived somewhere else if I wanted to, and it would have been Chicago. It would have made sense professionally, but also would have made sense like personally with Katie there. And I didn't take it. Obviously, I stayed at the Star. And then that's when we started talking about her moving, and it was whatever the day that we killed Bin Laden was the day that she moved. I remember like we were driving in the U-Haul, we had the radio on, and they broke in, like literally. I mean, it sounds made up, but it was as we saw the Kansas City skyline, you know, driving in. I was like, oh, we got Bin Laden. And then we lived. She moved in to my loft downtown, and we did that for about a year. Then got married and bought a house, and now have 2 kids.
Do you feel like it was a good thing that you, for a while, took somewhat separate paths, rather than if you would seamlessly gone from 7th grade all the way to being married?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think that one of us would have been sacrificing something in our 20s, you know, to geographically, professionally. And I think that if we didn't go those separate paths, I mean, this is like total armchair psychology, right?
Sure.
And I'm happy, like when we're both happy now. So, it's hard to find mistakes it's not hard to find mistakes, but it's hard to have regrets when the result is positive. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think it helped both of us kind of grow and know more of who we are. And there's certainly, I think, and there's other ways to do it, obviously, but for me, there's more certainty in that this is the absolute right person, you know, like
if you never dated and or had married or had relationships
and
with
look,
other
I know
people,
very good friends of mine, like I know people that have gone the other way and just never were apart, and they seem happy too, so you know, maybe that would have worked as well. But I don't, again, it's hard to regret when the result's been positive.
Right. You started working for the Lawrence Journal World. I think the story is that I read that actually right when you got your drive. Now, we know now that you were driving before, but when you got your learner's permit, and it said the day before, the second day you got your learner's permit was what the story said. Now, this may be, you know, not right. The first day you spent your time driving around trying to impress Katie, I guess.
That's exactly right.
What the story is. But so you were on the ground and getting your stuff going when you were still in high school.
Yeah, so I don't know if this came from my mom of you know, her little subtle signs, but I didn't want to. What I really didn't want was to get to my junior, senior year in college, or even worse, 23, 25 years old or whatever, and realize that this isn't what I wanted to do, you know. And I did objectively understand that it's weird to only want to do one thing from the time you're 12 on, you know, like that's it just
guilty.
But it's rare, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's definitely rare.
And so when people were like, well, you'll change your mind and that's good, that's, you know, that's normal, I was like, okay, I probably will, you know. And so I just wanted to make sure. And so my aunt, my dad's sister, worked at the Journal World at the time, and you know, she helped me. She didn't like help me get a job. They didn't pay me, you know, but helped me just like be in the newsroom that summer, the summer after I turned 16. And I mean, I did like what nobody else wanted to do. You know, I was like typing obituaries and news briefs. And I remember they had like a cartoon contest, like of I think they were going to redo which cartoons they ran. And so they had a vote. And, you know, this is long enough ago that I was by hand, you know,
counting the votes.
Yeah, I think Garfield won. I can't remember for sure. But it was that kind of stuff. And they also had this on the street or man on the street or something like that, where you go basically just like find 4 random people downtown and ask them.
I did that. People hate it.
Yes.
I mean, they run away.
Yes.
Well, of course, I did it, and I had a microphone in my hand.
Yeah.
But, I
mean,
they
feel like you're harassing them.
Yeah, I know.
Then you have to take their picture, or at least, you know, we did at the time. You know, like men and women both thought I was just hitting on them at times. I mean, it was. I hated that job too.
Yeah, that wasn't much fun. I did the same thing. Yeah.
But, you know, like
it's all part of it.
I still wanted to do it, you know, and I think maybe like that, if you test it like that and you still want to do it, that probably means that you want to do it, you know. And eventually they they gave me some games to cover and paid me like real American currency to do so, and it just kind of took off from there.
Before we go to professional Sam and wrap up our first part of this interview, you stayed, you obviously grew up in Lawrence from the time you were in 7th grade. Did you have any yearning to go anywhere but KU? You stayed around.
Yeah, so I did. There were a couple schools that made sense to me, journalism schools, and just like felt like I would enjoy. It was Indiana and North Carolina. I don't know why specifically those two schools, but like again, I don't want to. We definitely weren't rich growing up, but we also weren't poor. But the finances changed when my parents got divorced.
Sure.
And my sister went to Northwestern.
Okay.
So, that took a lot of the money. And when I started to just look financially about what it would cost out of state at those schools in Kansas, I know tuition's gone up a lot, but at that time,
it wasn't.
In-state tuition at Kansas was, I remember a semester tuition check. And I think I was only taking 12 hours that semester, but it being like $900 or something like that. I mean, it was just like not that much.
Wow, I don't feel so old then, because my first semester at KU, I was out of state, and it was $680.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
ridiculous now.
Lot.
Yeah, it sure has changed.
But when I thought about that, and then I thought about like this profession that I wanted to do, my first salary was going to be less than $30,000. It was going to be $20-some thousand. It just didn't make sense to go spend $30-40 grand a year on tuition. So that was a big part of it as well.
I assume you lived at home when you went to college?
No, I didn't. When I chose Kansas, that was important. I don't even remember that being an option. I think my mom, she had an interesting experience, like a relevant experience to this. She grew up in Chicago, in Skokie, and she went to Northwestern as a freshman. And at that time, they wouldn't. If you lived within a certain distance of Evanston, you could not live on campus. You had to live at home because they just didn't have enough beds or whatever. Okay. And so she did that her freshman year and hated it.
Right.
Just hated being home. Like, felt like she wasn't in college. Exactly. She was missing out on stuff. So, it was very like I don't even remember being at home as an option. So I lived my freshman year. I lived in a fraternity, and had some good memories, but just that kind of thing. It just wasn't for me.
Right.
And then the rest of the time got an apartment with some friends.
Okay, good. Let's take a time out, and we'll be back and talk more with Sam Mellinger. Of course, I knew this was going to be fun, and it is right now, as we continue with Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing on Danny Klinkscale's Reasonably Irreverent podcast.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Looking for a truly unique escape from your normal entertainment or corporate team-building regimen? Stay tuned for an exclusive offer only for Reasonably Irreverent listeners. I'm excited to tell you about an extraordinary destination, the Exit Room, located in the heart of beautiful downtown Lee Summit. The Exit Room is a distinctive entertainment option that offers a cool alternative to the normal couples night out, family get-togethers, and corporate team-building events. The Exit Room is a one-of-a-kind boutique escape room catering to special occasions and corporate team-building events and is unmatched in the Kansas City metro. With 5 individually designed and varied escape room adventures, your party or employees can unplug from their electronic world, interact with one another, match wits, and ultimately escape the humdrum of the ordinary. The Exit Room adventures cross decades and centuries and create fascinating fun. I know the owners well. They are local folks, their staff is warm and friendly, their lobby is inviting and beautiful, and their adventures are award-winning. Check online. There are over 1,000 reviews, and note that they are a rare 5-star ranked business. Visit their website and Facebook page, and any of my listeners who books online at theexitroomkc.com using the promo code Klinkscale19 gets 10% off any ticket purchase. The Exit Room in Lee Summit. Unplug, interact, and escape.
For many people, a family law case will be one of the most difficult experiences in their life. The law firm of Kenneth McRae will help you through it. Personal and effective help from Ken in concert with you will develop a unique strategy for your unique case. As Ken always says, divorce can be civil law, not civil war. Licensed in Kansas? Visit McRaeLawOffice.com or call 913-972-4765.
Sumner One is the company to make your office maximize efficiency. Their family of companies make up one of the largest independent dealers of office technology in the Midwest. They are proud to bring the best service and technology to top companies across the region. Sumner One can help your organization run more smoothly than ever. Sumner One printers, copiers, MFPs, managed print services, document management, infrastructure design, IT services, disaster recovery, and business continuity. Welcome to the one place where everything works. For more information, call Carl Little at 913-752-2256. Are you thinking of starting a new business? Does your current business feel stuck? Or are you just trying to grow what you already have? Running a business is a lot of work, and it takes the right team to make it all happen. If you're looking to grow your business, call my friends Ben and Greg over at Fuego Consulting. They put together a company that can help you reach your business goals. Whether you're looking to get online, build a social media strategy, or rebrand your business, they can help. Call Fuego at 816-663-9695 or visit them online at fuegoconsulting.com. Fuego Consulting. Let's grow your business together.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back to Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. Sam Mellinger is our guest. My name's Clinkscale, so it's been butchered 8 ways to Sunday. What's the percentage of people saying your name right?
Probably 50 at the most. But I always say this, like my own grandpa always said Mellinger, so it doesn't, like most of the time I don't even notice, Mellinger, right. Mellinger, whatever. Right. The most common one for me is Clinksdale with a D instead of a C. That's but anyway, at the outset I was going to ask you this rather obtuse, offbeat question, because I'm obtuse and offbeat, but I'm trying to think of the timeline of your age, and Sam is a cool and trendy boy's name now. Was it when you were young? No, I don't think I knew any Sams.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
But you know what? I'm the sixth. Like my son is the seventh Sam.
Okay. So there was there was no arguing with it.
No, yeah, and I remember when my dad when
was your dad named Sam?
Yep.
Okay.
And we all had different middle names. But we're all Samuels, and it's always, there's two things about this. One is when Katie was pregnant and we found out it was a boy, my dad was like, no pressure, don't feel like just because that's your name and my name and whatever, like, name them whatever you want. I'm like, really? Like, come on. Like,
after 6 in a row, I'm going to break the chain.
Yeah. Who am I? Right. But we also, my dad's dad was Junior, or like, that's what everybody called him. And he actually didn't have a middle name. But anyway, and so my dad always went by Dick. His middle name's Richard, and so I Sam, and went by Sam as a kid, and I just felt like that's what we would do. But my wife, she really likes the name, so we're going to stick with it.
Well, it now, as I said, is a trendy name. The names that when I grew up, everybody was named Bill and Danny and Joe, and and now like half the people in their 20s. Boys are named Justin and Jason, and I don't think that was a name that anybody used then. Yeah. So they'll all probably come around, but Sam's a nice name.
Seems to be a lot of Jacks.
Yes, a lot of Jacks now. Yeah. Yes, that's true. So you, what was your KU experience like?
It was great.
Were you working a lot, or did you have enough time to have a lot of fun?
A lot of both. Yeah, it was great. I loved it. I had a blast. Yeah, I mean, it was fun. Like the journalism school, I had some really good teachers. I mean, Rick Musser was sort of my guy. I think that, like, the academic side of college, it seems like a lot of it depends on whether you connect with that one teacher.
Right.
And for me, it was Rick. He was. I remember there was this class. I think it was called Advanced Reporting at the time. Anyway, it was basically like you worked at the Kansan. That class produced the UDK, the student paper. And, I remember the first day that we met, there had been a couple issues of the paper that were out, and Rick always marked them up with this red marker. And one day he just pulled out the paper and he read the lead. He read the first paragraph, and he's like, "Whose story was this? Raise your hand." And I remember the kid like was proud of it. He raised his hand like, "Yeah, that was me. That was me." And Rick said, "Are we? What's our rating here? On here? Can we talk openly?" No, I'm asking you, Danny. Like, can we talk openly here?
Sure,
can I
yes.
say a word? Okay. So he said, "How can you put your name on top of this warm piece of baby shit?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" Like, that was our teacher that just said this in class. And at that moment, I knew I was going to like Rick, because up until then, I feel like whatever I did, people would go, "Oh, that's great," And I was like, I knew it wasn't. You know what I mean?
Right.
And people were just trying to be nice and like build you
Right.
up or whatever. And so with Rick, I knew that he was going to tell you the truth. And he did. I connected with him. I took an independent study from him, maybe for 2 semesters, where at that time I was working at the Journal World, and I would just give him everything that I did, and he would mark it up, and this was really good, this was terrible, like, why didn't you think of this? And it was, I loved it. I loved that part of it. And socially, I loved it too. I had a lot of friends, I think I probably had the same college experience that a lot of people did, bars and parties and games and, hanging out at people's houses. It was great. It was great.
You've been in an environment now for your entire career, which obviously started then, where you're covering teams that you're rooting for.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never really had that experience, to be honest. And is that a difficult thing, do you think?
Not anymore.
And did you learn? Was that part of the learning? I mean, you're covering women's basketball at one point, so that maybe that wasn't it. But you end up covering teams that you wanted to win.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up. We stopped at some point because I was always playing soccer or baseball or whatever on the weekends. But grew up going to KU games, and both my parents. I mean, they met at Kansas, and actually both of their parents went to Kansas as well. That's not true. My mom's parents, my dad's parents.
Right.
Actually, my dad's dad went to law school, Kansas undergrad and law school. There's actually an award named after him. But anyway, it wasn't. I don't remember. I don't at least in my memory now. I don't have like a line of demarcation or whatever. But at some point, that stopped being a thing for me. I mean, the first time that, and I was probably 16, 17, I was in high school, the first time that I covered a KU basketball game for the Journal World. And that was a little overwhelming. I would never sat that close, first
Right.
of all. But at some point, at least for me, and there's no right or wrong way to do it, I don't think, but at least for me, and this is part of the way I was taught anyway, but that part of it started to wear off, and then it was just all about like my story and what I was going to find in this game to write about, and how I was going to be able to execute that, and whether I'd hit deadline and all those things. It's a hard thing to articulate. Me and Gabe DeArmond have actually had talks about this. Gabe went to Mizzou, and his dad covered Mizzou, and now his whole job is, and he does a terrific job covering Mizzou now professionally, and whether Missouri wins or loses doesn't bother him. It's about like what his coverage. And I grew up, forget Kansas, but like also Royals games,
Sure, right.
and Chiefs, everything. And but it's a hard thing. It's not a better or worse way to experience sports. It's just completely different. And now, instead of my day being made or broken based on whether my team wins, it's and not made or broken. I'm exaggerating to prove a point, but it's more about what did I find in this game? Was it a good game? Was it a fun game? Was there something that happened? This is kind of a goofy example, but when the Chiefs played at the Raiders a few years ago, and Dontari Poe lines up and catches a touchdown pass, and it's Hungry Pig right. I loved that game. I adored that play and everything about it, but it was about that play. It wasn't that
I hated everything about it. So
it wasn't about like whether the Chiefs won or lost. So it just changes. It just changes.
Yeah, I've always found that I've been glad that I'm not much. I don't I was stunned that I was as excited as I was on the Astros run to the World Series a couple of years ago. So
Yeah.
I figured I'd somewhat gotten past that.
Yeah.
Do you feel in any way would it almost have been better if you worked in Chicago and could be
I've
a
wondered
Royals
about that.
fan or a Chiefs fan?
I've wondered about that. Yeah. If I lived somewhere else and it wasn't all around me, and if it wasn't my professional
Because
experience,
you know more too. You know where the bodies are buried.
Yeah.
and-
But you know what is interesting is I have never had more fun professionally and never felt more connected to the work than I did in 2014 and 15 with the Royals. But it wasn't, again, I hope I explain this in a way that makes a little bit of sense, but it wasn't necessarily just like that team that I grew up rooting for is winning, and I've got a Royals jersey at home because I don't, it wasn't that. It was, I just got swept up in the emotion that the city I live in and have lived in, my entire adult life
Right.
was having. I mean, that was a transformative
Yes, it was.
experience for Kansas City. And I felt every freaking bit of that,
Right.
and I loved just being a tiny, 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 tiny part of that, and being able to hear from fans, from readers, of how they were experiencing this, and hopefully being able to translate just 1% of that into columns. It was a blast. I mean, I just I said this before. I feel like I could live to be 150 years old and work my entire life and not have that specific experience again. It was incredible.
When you started working for the Star right after you got out of college, and you relatively, I would say, by professional standards, climbed the ladder pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Although you certainly paid your dues as well.
Yeah. It was, I was all set to take a job in New York. There was a job, not New York City, but New York State. And it was going to be, I thought, a really good job. It was a paper that had a reputation for kind of,
Where was
helping
this?
young writers. Glens Falls.
Okay. Yeah.
Glens Falls, New York. And the job at the Star came open. I had a friend that worked there, and she had told me that it was going to come open, and I interviewed, and I thought it went well, and at the end I was like, do you know when you might make a decision? They were like, maybe a month or two, and I was like, okay, well, I have this other offer, and I got to tell them by the end of the week. And it wasn't like a threat or anything, I was
Right.
just like, so I appreciate your time, but I can't not have a job.
Right.
And they were like, oh, okay, we didn't realize. And they called me, a couple of days later and offered me the job. And it was, it's a job that no longer exists, right? It was covering high schools in Johnson County. It was the very bottom of the ladder or whatever. And it was so low. You had to get a promotion. You couldn't have that job for more than 2 years. At the end of 2 years, you either had to have gotten a promotion or you got to go. Right. It was a way for them to basically test out young writers, basically. And I was lucky enough. There was a job that came open, because a job may not come open in 2 years, and
Right.
there's nothing that you can do. But I was lucky and, got a job, another high school job. But I probably covered high schools for, I think, about 5 years in total, and loved it. I really did.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask. So you didn't ever feel like, man, I'm covering high school.
No, I didn't. I'm not going to, there were parts of it I didn't like.
Right.
There was some busy work. There was, cross country meets happen really early.
And they're long.
Yeah. And swim meets are hot. So there were parts of it that I didn't enjoy, but, covering, high school basketball, high school football, high school volleyball. I enjoyed it. It was fun. You get to know people in a different way. I have relationships today with people that I met, athletes and coaches, it's a lot harder for those same types of relationships to happen at college and in the pros. Now, look, at the end of that 5 year, I think it was about 5 years, I was ready to,
Right.
I was, come on, I like this, but
Right.
I want to move up a little bit. And then a baseball job came open. It wasn't the beat. But again, it's a job that no longer exists at the Star, but it was basically baseball features. And so Bob Dutton at the time was a beat writer, and he was terrific. I mean, he would just have all the nuts and bolts and great on game stores and all that. And then my job was features. My job was, every Sunday have something interesting that people, don't know that they need to know, kind of, or write the hot topic, but in a different way. And I love that job too. I've always thought that baseball beat would be like the best job in the world if you're young and single, and the worst job. I mean, like if right now, if they're like, we need you to be the beat writer and cover 150 games or whatever, I would think about doing something else.
Right.
I just, with kids and a wife and all that, I don't know how people do it. But I loved that job because I was there all the time. So I knew people and had relationships and knew things. But I didn't have to write every day about a 3-1 win or a loss. And I did that job for about 5 years. And then I got the column that came open when Joe Posnanski went to Sports Illustrated. And this is a weird thing how it happened, but Kansas City Star readers went from having Joe Posnanski and Jason Whitlock writing sports columns, maybe the best, pair of sports columnists in the country. That I'm probably biased, but I thought so. And then like 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later, it was just me. It was just me at 29, 30 years old or whatever. And I mean, it was intimidating as hell. I can say that I was terrified. I just, people say this, and not just in our line of work, but I think anytime you get promoted or get a bigger platform or whatever, you're just kind of afraid that you're going to be exposed as a fraud, or just not good enough. And I had that in droves.
Is being a columnist something you really wanted to do?
I never. This might sound weird.
It wasn't like an aspiration of yours?
No. This might. I hate false humility, and so I promise you that this is not false humility. I never thought it was possible, so it's not something that I dreamed of. Does that make sense? Like I just never thought. When I graduated college, I thought that the job that Blair Kirchhoff had at that point was like a dream job, and it was like national colleges. Yeah. And I thought that I was going to
He probably thinks that now too.
Yeah, that's right. Just being able to cover college. I loved college sports as a kid. And I thought I'd have a college beat and then do something like that. I thought that, I just never, when you're at the Kansas City Star and Joe and Jason are the columnists, like those jobs are locked up, you know? So I never dreamed of it until it came open, and I started thinking about it, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I talked to my boss about it, and I was like, look, I don't know if I'd be any good. That's for you guys to decide, but I'd love to try it. And yeah, it worked out.
Yeah, it certainly did. You obviously have had a very fulfilling career, and obviously we'll talk a little bit about your personal life and your sons here in a second, but one of the most poignant and wonderful things I've ever read in my life is the story you wrote about your mom when she passed away in 2017. A lot of the information that I know about this for this interview comes in that. And she died suddenly and unexpectedly, a healthy woman. That must have been. I mean, she wasn't like super young, but by today's standards, she wasn't old either. That must have been. And the column is, just look it up, folks. If you just Sam Mellinger mom column, it comes right up. It was in 2017. And you wrote the column almost immediately. That must have been a very, very emotional time.
Yeah, I was devastated. I mean, I'm going to start tearing up now. Just talk like my sister. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb every night, and but I don't know if this is like in general. If somebody calls, it won't ring unless somebody calls the same number like twice in a span of 5 minutes or something like that. And it rang in the middle of the night, and which means that my sister had called for the second time. And I was dead asleep, and I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody, and so I turned it off. turned the ringer off, and then it rang again. I was like, oh, like
Something's
started
up.
to realize, and she was just bawling when I answered the phone, and I don't know when it was like 3 a.m, and I was just like without. I hung up the phone, and my wife kind of sat up and asked, and I just said, my mom's dead, and I wasn't even crying, like it just hadn't hit me, like I was just like without speech or anything, and I couldn't go back to sleep. It was in May, so it was a nice night, like it was probably in the 60s or whatever. I just went out to our deck, and I just kind of like sat there, and I just wanted to be outside and by myself, and I don't know how long I was there. It could have been 2 minutes, and it could have been 2 hours. I don't know. And I just felt like I needed to write. It's just always how I've expressed myself or like made sense of things. And I went inside and got my computer, and I just sat, like, I don't know why. It was just like, it felt like what I needed to do. And I flew to North Carolina. My mom had moved. She lived in Durham, North Carolina, and I got on a plane later that day, and I took my computer, and just in between, like, helping my mom's husband, just sort of cope, or I don't know, process, whatever. My sister flew out there the day after, and I just started writing, and I didn't, that was just for me, that was therapy. Like, I mean, literally, that was therapy for me to, like, remember the good parts, and for some reason, I mean, just when it's on paper, or on a computer screen, it just, it's there. Like, this really happened. But also a way to remember everything that she meant to me. And I finished it like on Saturday, or I don't know. And I just thought, you know what? Like, I think she would like this, and I think she would like other people to be able to read this. And I think that, total coincidence, but that Sunday was Mother's Day. Right. And so I sent it to my boss, and I was like, I don't know if this makes sense on the sports page, whatever, but, like, I just, here's something, that I wrote, and they ran it. And, I mean, the reaction to it was, just overwhelming. And again, I know it's a coincidence. It was Mother's Day, but, people saying, like, I called my mom because of you, or because of this story. And that was the part that really got me. 'Cause, like, that was, my mom, if she knew that, like, would just be so proud that, like, her story, that, like, her life, and sort of how she impacted her child was presented in a way that made other people call their mom. Like, I mean, that just would have meant the world to her. That and it meant the world to me that people said that people reacted like that.
Well, if people don't remember it or haven't seen it, it certainly is worth revisiting. And one of the messages of it is to use grief to find joy.
Yeah. How
long did it take you to process that message? And it's only been a couple of years down the road. Have you?
If this is what you're asking, I knew in the moment that you had to, like, let the grief work. You had to, that it should hurt, like it, and again, like I've said this a million times already, just talking to you right now, but I was very lucky as a kid, and to have, both my parents. But, obviously I was closer to my mom. I love my dad, but obviously I was closer to my mom. And there's people who lose a parent and don't feel anything. Or there's people that lose a parent and, gosh, I wish I would have called them I haven't spoken to them in 10 years or whatever. And I talked to my mom earlier that day,
right.
And talked to her. We didn't talk every day, but a lot, you
Right.
know, and had the kind of relationship where she knew like what I thought of her and how grateful I was, and she knew what I thought of her, and so sorry, I'm getting sidetracked a little bit, but it if you think about it in those terms, like without pain there is no joy, you know, and if the only reason that I was feeling all those things is because I loved her and I wanted her around, and I wanted, you know, all the things that she did for me. So I wouldn't trade that, you know, and she modeled that for me during the divorce, you know, that she kind of hit the grief head on, and was overwhelmingly sad about it for a long time. But I believe that if you do it that way, you don't get over it, but you get through it, or you move past it faster than you do otherwise. And it's more real. Like then when, you know, if you're suppressing it all the time, then if you're just telling people you're doing okay, you're not, and it lasts longer. You know, it's just, it's a healthier and faster way to do it. I did it, you know, when I got divorced, it was, you know, kind of on a much lower scale, but a similar deal. It just, and then that kind of hit me too, that that the way that I was coping, the way that I was experiencing and processing the emotions from my mom's death was learned from her. And that was a weird, like when I thought about it like that, I was like, she's helping me get through this, you know? And that, that smacked me across the face too. This is a pretty amazing thing, you know, like she deserved more time, you know, to see, you know, my kids and my sister's kids grow up, and she was a great grandma. And that's one of the parts that hits me the most. But, you know, the time she lived a great life. She helped a lot of people. She did work that she loved, you know. So it's, you just try and think more about the positives.
And in conclusion, you talked many times during this conversation about how impactful and what a great experience your childhood was, and now you're creating a childhood for two children. What's that like for you?
It's the most amazing thing in my life. You know, being able to see these kids, like everybody says, you know, don't blink, you know, they grow up so fast. And it's true. The other day I was on a flight coming back home, and I was looking at pictures, and, you know, just pictures from, you know, like March and April, they look like different kids. And, you know, one of the things that somebody told me was, when you have kids is like, enjoy changing diapers. They don't mean like literally, like, but if you can embrace and sort of enjoy all the parts that maybe are messy, literally, or that people complain about, then you are embracing the entire part of it. And again, like without pain, there is no joy. I'm not trying to get super philosophical, but without sort of those hard times, without, you know, a meltdown or whatever, then the good times don't mean as much. You know, we just, this is such a tiny example, but it's just on my head right now. Our older, he's 5.5, he's in kindergarten, and he played basketball. He had his first basketball game the other day, and he loved it. I mean, he was like bouncing around and like so happy and into it, and just absolutely loved it. And me and my wife both, like, our feeling, our joy of being able to see that is enhanced because, like, he's had other, you know, we've seen him not love things. We've seen him like struggle. We've seen him, you know, and that part of it matters too. But I again, I'm getting sidetracked, but it is, you know, it's everything. It's like, I mean, it's why I do anything in my life. And now they're getting to the age where, for instance, next summer we're going to take this road trip, and this is total like Griswold kind of thing. But again, like I used to go up to Chicago. Me and my sister, we always go, 3-4 times a year, and we did like the Art Institute, the Shed Aquarium, Science and Industry, like all these museums. And now I'm going to recreate my childhood for our kids. We're going to drive up there, spend a couple days, maybe go to a baseball game, then meet up with Katie's family at, hopefully anyway, up in Michigan. So anyway, it's the coolest thing in the world. I know kind of sometimes the most boring thing in the world can be listening to somebody else talk about their kids and everything. So I appreciate you indulging me on this, but it's amazing. I knew I would love it, and I love it 100 times more than I thought I could.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.